I just picked me up a new Holley carburetor. This is a vacuum secondary 670 CFM. I'm going to unbox it, install it on the Chevelle, and I'm going to walk everybody through how the different fuel circuits add up. You have your idle mixture, you've got your transfer slots, you got your main barrels or your main jets, you have a power valve that sits on top of that, and then you've got the accelerator pump. I will try to walk you through, show how everything works, and how I tune it on the street. I will be using a vacuum gauge, and I've got an AFR gauge in the car.
So before we open up any boxes, let's go over the 4 main fuel circuits and the accelerator pump and what they do. This is your first stop in the field to your engine, and on the Holley, they're just on the side. There's these little screws on the side of the metering block, and if you only have 2, like in the front, you want to start about a turn and a half out and adjust from there. On the carburetor I have, which is an Avenger 670, it has one on each corner, and so I start about a half a turn out and go from there, and you use your vacuum gauge to tune that in, and it's basically the highest vacuum, and then I like to tigeration it up just a little bit because that can actually help it if you have an automatic and you drop it in drive. Now there's a little bit more that feeds the curb idle, and you're just starting to get into what's called the transfer slots. So the transfer slots can be a big point of hesitation and just off idle. So if you're just getting going or you're cruising and your foot's off the gas and then you just hit it a little bit and you got that is usually your transfer slots. Everybody likes to jump straight to the accelerator pump and overcompensate that. But the transfer slots are set with your basically your idle speed screw. You just can't run that up and down wherever you want. Like if you have a big cam and you've got that cranked down, you're probably way too far in your transfer slots, and you'll have a hesitation upon acceleration. And it'll also you won't be able to control the mixture because the transfer slot fuel dumping out of there will stomp all over your idle circuit. So you want to get that right, and that's where you hear the term you need to square it, because that is just the very beginning of the transfer slot. So if you're down below it or you're above it, you're going to have that little bit of hesitation. So I'll go over that more when I set it up. And then when you're past the transfer slots, your main jets kick in, and that runs through the little barrels in the center of your carburetor. And that is your general, all those 3 add up. Your idle circuit doesn't go away, it doesn't shut off. It's still feeding the overall picture. It might be feeling kind of small, but it is there. Okay, so those last 3, idle, transfer slots, and main jets, those are all by throttle position. That is where you have your foot. Now, power valve, if you're wide open acceleration or any type of heavier acceleration where your vacuum drops, your engine needs more fuel to maintain itself, and this is beyond the accelerator pump. The accelerator pump only happens when you're physically moving the gas pedal down. If you've moved it down and you're holding it, you need a richer mixture than just cruising, and your main jets isn't enough, and that's where the power valve comes in. And so when you look at those, they have little numbers on them like 6.5 and 8.5 and 10.5. That is what the vacuum reading on your manifold vacuum is when that opens up, and I think it's worth about another 5 to 7 jet sizes. But you tune that in by what you think when you drive the car. I'm going to use a vacuum gauge, and I'll show it to you when I do it. But all 4 of those, when you're floored or going up a hill, all add up to the total picture. Now your accelerator pump on the end, that is just a momentary, you have to be moving that gas pedal. It's a physical pump. And so if you push on it and then stop pushing on it, you get that initial squirt of fuel, and then once the vacuum ends up pulling out of the rest of the transfer slots, main jets, power valve, what have you, your accelerator pump is done and you're going. So your overall rich or your air fuel ratio while you're floored is your idle, transfer, main jet, and power valve. Together, your accelerator pump is only momentary. So let's get this box open and see what we got, and maybe throw it on the car and start doing some tuning. So this is a Holley Street Avenger 670 CFM. This is a vacuum secondary carb. These are arguably a little bit easier to tune up for a street. A double pumper, you almost are tuning two barrel carburetors that face each other, and here on the vacuum secondaries, you pretty much just setting up the jets and you're setting up how fast or hard it kicks in depending on the vacuum, which is just a set of springs. This thing was about $650 to my door. You can get them off of Amazon. I got some links down below. I also got a set of jets and a few other tools. And if you're going to be tuning or playing around with these, you kind of want that on the shelf. It just makes life a little easier. It did come with fuel line hoses and a gasket and kind of everything I really needed to set it up. So I'm really not going to go in depth about putting this on your vehicle because it's going to vary wildly. But it's a nice unit. Looks fantastic.
It's all hooked up. And I want to give you a word of caution. This is the installation tuning manual that comes with it. And on page 8, it says, idle mixture needles control the air-fuel mixture at idle. These have been preset at the factory and should not need any adjustments. Yeah, check for yourself. Mine were way off. The 2 idle mixture screws on the driver's side were completely shut off, and these 2 on the other side were only a quarter open. I went through and opened all 4 of them half a turn. So your goal here is to get to start and idle. Your first step is to set the floats, and I'll show you how to do that. You have to get it idle and running. So I know I went off earlier about getting your transfer slot set and all that. You can forget about that now. I'll show you how to set them up. But as for now, if you have just 2 adjustments in the front and not 4, do a turn and a half. I like to do a half a turn if you have 4. Crank up the idle a little bit. And I also like to turn on the ignition and not do anything because you want to see if your choke is going to warm up and open up. That's very important because if it's not opening up all the way, it has its own fast idle circuit. It's just a mechanical screw that you adjust and it literally holds this up. And you don't want that messing around with any of your other settings. So what I'm going to do is turn it on, make sure this opens all the way, set these at half a turn, and see if it'll start and run so I can set my floats. Okay, I got it idling. Everything seems to be okay. I don't have any huge fuel leaks. See if we can get that. You can see where the gas level in the bowl is, and it looks like it's a little bit high. Maybe a little bit high up there. So I'm going to turn that down a little bit. So adjusting your floats is right here. I want to lower my float down. I want my fuel level to go down to the bottom of the sight glass. And the screw on the bottom, as you go clockwise, it screws it down. And this on the top is your stop screw. And so you just want to open this up a little bit, counterclockwise, go down and tighten it back up and see where you are. Now this is something you can do with it running. You just want to be able to hear me talk about it. If so. Now in older carburetors, we just have a plug that screws out. You undo the plug and you adjust it to where it's just right on the bottom, maybe just barely starting to run out, maybe just a hair bit below. You're fine either way. And Holley recommends that you raise it up to about halfway, maybe a third, if you're drag racing or doing any type of heavy usage. But that's hard to do when you have a plug, and that's why they came out with these sight glasses. And that's really nice, but you can still set it up pretty much the same. And so I'm going to start it up and go through the entire adjustment. And so as I went down, the fuel level pushed up because you're displacing the fuel. And so you have to run it to use the fuel that's in the carburetor, so that goes back down. So the idle circuit here, there's a little bit of an idle circuit back there. And so I'll bump the throttle a few times and just kind of spend some time tuning that in. This is kind of your first step. Once you get your float levels done, you can move on to your idle mixture, idle level, and dial in your transfer slots. So I'm going to set that up now. Okay, I think I got it. Let's see if I can show it to you. Can't really see it, but if you just bump the car a little bit, see how it just sloshes up? It's just right at the bottom of the window. I'm going with that. Front and rear about the same. That might even be a hair bit low, but I'm going to roll with that. Yeah. All right, move on. All right, now that the float levels are set, we're going to spend a bunch of time on idle mixture, idle level, and transfer slot setup. This is really important, and there's a couple ways to get to the transfer slot adjustment. You can actually set it up on the bench before you even start the installation of the carb, and then you can dial it in using the throttle plates from the rear, or there's a couple other methods such as drilling holes if you have too big of a cam, whatnot. But I've got this other carburetor. It's exactly the same thing, except it's a 770 CFM, and it's a little bit too big for this application, so I opted not to use it. But it's perfect for show you what I'm talking about. And what I'm going to do is dial in the idle, set the mixture, and then pull the carburetor off and take a peek underneath and see where I ended up, and then adjust from there. So that is the longer, more pain in the rear method, but it will give you a better idea of what's going on. So here is the bottom of the carburetor. And this hole here in the barrel is where your idle mixture fuel comes out. The screws that you turn on the side for idle mixture, on all four corners on this carburetor, it comes out these little holes right here. There's one on every barrel. And then above that, right there at the tip of the screwdriver, is your transfer slot. And right off of idle, you can see that it is a literal slot. And what it does is it is your transfer point between your idle circuit and your main jets, which is the barrels further up in the carburetor. Now, if you have this too far open, like you've got a high lift camera or something, not a good vacuum, you're defeating the purpose of the transfer slot. That's already feeding fuel into your engine, and you can tell because you have that bad hesitation right off of idle, and your idle mixture screws on the side of the carb don't help you out because this is kind of stomping on that. You don't want that. And so if you ever hear somebody like drilling a hole, what they're doing is they're trying to increase the airflow through the carb so they can bring this back down and get the transfer slot set up correctly. And you alternatively, like say if you have a carburetor that's too big, you might be even below this and you'll have the same problem because there is no transferring ability of those slots. And so right now I've got it pretty squared off, and this is 0.020, and that's a good starting point. You can see how thin that is. I can shove it right in there and just cover that slot up. That tells me I'm pretty close. You can go a hair bit more than that. I think you can go to about double this and still be fine. So one way to set up your transfer slots is to do it right here like this on the bench. You can adjust your curb idle down here. It's that big screw on the side. You can set that up to, that is exactly where you like it. But if your idle is too low or too high, you can go up and you can actually adjust the stop point on your secondaries, and there's a little screw right in here that allows you to do that. And this is a real pain in the butt to get to when it's on the car, and some people will put in like an Allen head because you can, a lot of those have a bend in them, and it's a little easier on the clocking. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do it the hard way, and the hard way is just putting it on the car, getting it to run on idle, set your mixture up, and then unbolting the carb, lifting it up, and seeing where you're at. And then setting your transfer slots and adjusting for that. It'll take a few rounds to do it, and it's a little bit more annoying, but it'll show you the process. And just since we're here, there's a hole right here in the bottom. That is your vacuum signal for your power valve. So that goes straight. This is also your vacuum. If you hook your distributor up here, which I do, that is your manifold vacuum. Power valve gets it from almost the same location. That's good to know for later on when you're tuning that circuit. So the first thing I'm going to do is start the car and warm it up. You don't want to do any tuning if the car is cold because it changes everything. So I'm going to get it up to 180, 185 degrees temperature, hook up my vacuum gauge, and then start tuning my idle. Well, I got, it's like 16 maybe. I can get that a little bit better. I'm going to go lean first and see what happens. Oh, didn't like that. See how that went right down? So now I'm going to go richer and see if it likes it better. It did, so I'm going to do it to all of them. Just the 8th turn. Yeah, that's sped up just a little bit. what, 15, 16, almost 17. Definitely not an aggressive cam, that's for sure. That's a pretty darn good vacuum. Now we're at, oh, probably 900-ish RPM. I don't need it that high. That is, I'm guessing around 8. That's not bad. I think I got it. So after lots and lots of messing with it, this is where I'm at. Right about 17. 17. So I got lots and lots of vacuum here. Float bowls are right where I want them. I'm going to double check this after I shut it off, but that might have. I might need a little bit of tweaking. AFR gauge says it's running rich at about right at 12. That seems rich for an idle, but this is where it's happiest. It's where it had the highest vacuum, and if I put it in gear, which I'll do, it held the happiest. Holds a little higher than 12. RPM seems to hold pretty good. Put her back in park. Seems to be alright. So I'm going to call that good. I've got the idle mixture set how I like it now, and I like my idle speed. And so what I'm going to do next is take the carburetor right back off, flip it over, and see where my transfer slots are. Getting that right is really important. You don't want to skip that, or you'll be stuck with a hesitation right off of idle constantly. It's annoying, and people head right to the accelerator pump to try to make up for that. Get this right now so you don't have to worry about it in the future. So off comes carb, and I'll flip it over. All right, I got the carburetor all unhooked. I did not unhook the fuel line, but I did drain the bowls. So let's flip it over here. Try not to make too big of a mess. Let's see what I got. Hey, I'm not too far off. Oh, I'll take that. I might even be good. Let's see that. You can just see the transfer slots there, and they look to be pretty squared off to me. I don't have to do anything else. I'll take that. Now, when I had the 770 on here, I had all kinds of problems. And just doing the CFN changed everything else. If I did have to make any adjustments, I would make it right here on this screw, dial in my idle speed. But I'm going to call that good. All right. Road test time. So what I want to do now is, now my base idle mixture settings are good and I'm happy where my transfer slots are, I want to set up my main jets. You have to do that driving down the road. Now I've got my AFR gauge and I did hang a vacuum gauge on the inside. I'll throw that video up. But if you remember that graphic I used earlier, so all this adds together. You've got your idle, you got your transfer slots, and then you got your main jets, and this is for cruising. And you don't need this stuff to set that up. You can drive down the road, you want to get past the transfer slots, not under a heavy load, high vacuum, and you can see kind of just how the car feels. Like if you start getting a lean surge, go up 2 jets type of thing, or go down and go down until you get that lean surge and then go up 2 jets. I'm actually going to use the AFR gauge, and the vacuum gauge is, I'm going to use that for my power valve setting. Power valve is when you're going up a hill or you need pulling a load or you need some more power, you hit the gas, your accelerator pump kicks in, but when you stop actually moving it, you need your power valve. And with the vacuum gauge, I can see where I'm at, and then I can size my power valve appropriately depending on where it's open. So I'm just waiting for it to warm up now. So I'm gonna start driving around a little bit. Once I get there, I'm gonna see what the AFR is. Okay, I've got the car all warmed up. I'm gonna try to take a drive up and down the highway. The first thing I'm doing is I'm gonna look at the main jets to see if it's too rich or too lean. I've got a vacuum gauge and my AFR gauge hooked up, and I got another camera on them. You don't need this. You can actually just downsize your jets until you get like a lean surge, and then you can go up a couple. I'm going to try to do it this way. The vacuum gauge will not really tell me if I'm in my main jets. My throttle position will. The vacuum gauge is, I can take a look and see if my power valve is in the right area. I've got a 6.5 power valve in there, that's a 6.5 vacuum reading. And I'm going to keep an eye on that. And this is kind of a seat of the pants feeling. It's just, how does the car run and drive? Fortunately, I don't have a lot of flat road in front of me. It's just a bunch of up and down hills. So I'm going to take off and cruise and see if I can get my basic AFR reading. Third gear, I got 373 gears. I'm tacking about 2,500 RPM, and it looks like I'm pushing about 14 AFR. I think I'm up into, yeah, my vacuum is pretty high, which means I'm not loading the engine at all. I got a slight uphill coming, and if that AFR still looks good, I'm going to call it. Now I'm slightly into it, but I'm still holding 11, 12 pounds of vacuum, so that is, and this under, I'm happy with that. This has got 65 jets in it, so I really need to do is pop it up into drive, try to load up this engine, get the vacuum down, and see if I can get into the power valve. And there we go. It's about 5. So 5, 6, 7 or so. You know, maybe Holley got it right on this one, because my power valve is 6.5 is when it opens up. So if I get into there, my FR jumps down to about more like 12. I got another long hill coming up. So I'll get past the pump. That might be a little heavy. That's bad. Might be a little rich once that power valve kicks in. You compensate on that by cleaning out your main jets a little bit. That's a little better. That's a 12. I'm going to slow down here because there was a cop last time I came through here, so I'm going to ease off a little bit. But I might just, oh, there we go. There we go. Look at that. That's, I might have to look at that recording. I'm too lean. Too lean, and I was on a light uphill acceleration, so I might have to change this power valve and not get hit by that. And anyway, I'm going to head back, and I think I'm going to knock down the power valve to maybe like a 7 or 8. I'm going to have to look at this video to make sure, and then I'm going to fool around with the accelerator pump, because it kind of, it's got a little bit of a lean bog. Nothing like a blind hill and a huge trailer full of horses pulling right out in front of you. So after driving this around a bunch more off the camera, I was able to get the air-fuel ratio to go to 16, which is pretty lean. And that's on a slide acceleration up a hill, and that was right at 10 pounds of vacuum. So that tells me I need a power valve that opens up within that range. So I've got a 6.5 in it now. I'm going to jump up to the 10.5. I don't think I'm going to change the jet. So I was thinking it might be running a little lean, but probably with this mild build, I think it's going to be perfectly fine. Once I get the power valve changed, I'm probably going to fool around a whole bunch with the accelerator pump and just see. Like right now, if I just put it in third, 2500 RPM and just punch it, I get a slight, and so I think that is actually my camshaft or my pump cam. It's sitting in the number 2 spot. I'll probably move that to the number 1 at the same time. Anyway, back to the garage and I'll show you how I change out the power valve.
So to get to the power valve and also the front jets, they're located in what's called a metering block. And you have to take the front bolt off. So when you pull one of the lower screws out of the 4 bolts that hold that in, shove a paint cap under there. You can see I've got a clear one, and that will drain all the fuel out of the bolt, so you don't have to drain all over your intake manifold. And that paint cap is just about the right size. It works out pretty good. And once you can get that front piece off, you just kind of, sometimes that metering block might be a little stuck a little bit, just pry it off with a flathead and you can see your power valve and jets mounted right in it.
And I got the metering block off and on the bench, and this is the power valve. It screws right in there. I'll set the camera when I change it out, but this, the vacuum holds it in place, and then you hit, and on this one, see the 6.5 that's on there? That's 6.5 pounds of pressure. When you go down there, the spring cut's strong enough to open up the power valve. These are your main jets for your primaries. We haven't even talked about secondaries yet. And right now I'm going to leave those. They're 65, and this is my Holley jet collection. 64 is the smallest they make. I honestly thought it was going to be up in here before the day was done. And I might be, I don't know. But here is my collection of power valves. Here is my 10.5. And so I'm going to swap those out, put it in, and then I'm going to talk about a little bit about the accelerator pump, different nozzle sizes, and these cams, because I'm going to make a change. Changing these power valves is really straightforward. They just unscrew with a 1-inch under-inch. There we go. That's interesting, but there's a gasket here and a gasket here. I got 2 gaskets. This one didn't have one, so I've got more over there. But I think I'm going to just use the single gasket and screw it back in. I mean, it was working perfectly fine, and so I don't know if that would actually do a whole heck of a lot. So to snug it down really good. Now, if I were changing the jets, I've got this fancy Holley jet tool. They just simply screw out, and you can get away with using a flat head, and they just simply come out like that. Not rocket science, that's for sure. Getting to them is harder. If you notice, I used a paint can lid to collect the gasoline so I didn't pour it absolutely everywhere, but that's changed. So I'm going to stick this back in and then take a look at my accelerator pump cam. Okay, I've got the bowl back on. My power valve has been changed, and now I want to take a look at the accelerator pump. And I kind of been holding off to the end because I wanted everything else to be pretty dialed in. But this thing, as you hit the throttle, there is a cam under this here, and that makes this go up and down. And here's your actual pump. It's underneath, and when that gets pushed and squirted underneath that big Phillips screwdriver, if you saw that, that is your gas squirting out. Now, your number 1 spot for hesitation issues is to check this. If you make any changes, you want this tight, or not super tight, but it's got to be touching. So if I just move this a little bit, I want to be able to see that. Now, I might show you on this carburetor since this is... So if I move the throttle a little bit, I want to see that pump moving as well. Not having this too loose, so you can adjust that. You can extend or make that tighter. Making that too loose makes a gap, and that's where a lot of flat spots occur. That one's not too bad, but of course my high idle's on because this thing cooled back off. So let me cut that off. Oh, get this. Okay, there we go. Idle kicked off. So if I move this, that's not too bad. There's a little, see, there's a little bit going on there, and I think that's the cam position. So if you can see it, so there's two positions on the cam. Now you can just see there's a screw in there, so the screw is in the number 2 position. That is a paint cam, and here is a selection of cams. Actually, I think that is an orange cam. Anyway, that is the number 1 position. That is the number 2 position. Number 1 position goes in the number 1 hole. The number 2 position goes in the number 2 hole. And the number 2 position slightly clocks it, I think, down a little bit. And it delays the pump shot just a hair. And this is where the joy comes in, is these all have different profiles. And you can tune in your pump shot. And you can do that along with the squirter. So this is a 25 squirter, and I've got a 37, and in it I've got a 31. I'm going to just stay with the squirter on the 31, and I'm going to try to tune in when it happens. And just for fun, here is a hold down. That's an Allen head, and it is hollow. This holds down the squirter, and this is not a bad idea to do. I might put that in. Here's a regular pump screw that came in. That the gasoline has to squirt around the threads and around the screw, and that's generally not a big problem unless you're getting into a high pump, high jet situation. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and move that to the number 2 squirt position and go for a drive. All right, I'm back on Test and Tune Hill Road, and it's looking like going to the 10.5 power valve. It's well worth it. So it's getting constantly cut off. If I can get my vacuum right around 10 again, it stabilizes much faster, the AFR gauge. I do have a little bit of a hesitation still if I had to stomp the gas. That is, yeah, that's way better. Yeah, going to that 10.5 power valve, that was the right move. I still got a little bit of hesitation though when I just hop on it. There's a long hill. Let's see if I can get that for the camera. I got somebody stopping in front of me, of course. And then almost turning in, driving juice. That vacuum right there at 10. Yeah, see, that is way more stable. If I can get it right below that. There's still a little bit, you saw that AFR gauge peak a little bit. I think at this point, I'm going to stop paying attention to it, just see how it feels. I still feel a little bit of hesitation. So from here, I can start playing around with squirter sizes. I got some 35s. I don't think I need it. I can start playing around with cams, and I probably will. It's not too far off. So I'm pretty happy with how everything's running, except for that little hesitation on the accelerator pump. So I'm going to see if I can get that. And what I'm going to test first is to make sure I'm not too rich on that. It could actually be a too much fuel bog, and showing up as a lean bog. It's not popping or anything. So how I'm going to start out is I'm just going to change the squirter, and this is a 25. It's kind of an extreme change going from a 31, but I'm just going to drop it in there, warm the car up, go for a drive, and see what's going on. And if I don't like it, I might try a 37 just to go the other way, and start dialing in from there. I've got a whole bunch of pump cam options as well. The cam I have in it is the orange cam, and that is about middle of the road. So I will swap this out and drive. All right, car's warmed up. I'm turning about 2100 RPM. Got my foam point at the AFR gauge and see what it does when I can it. Big hesitation, and then it took off good. So I'll do it again here. I think it's worse with the 25 squirter. I don't think I need bigger than the 31. Well, let's go ahead and throw in the 37 and see what happens. Okay, got the 31 jets in it now, and it absolutely feels a little bit better. Here, I'll hit it. Still has that hesitation, but I was in third gear, turning 1100 RPM. And if anything, I think I'm flooding it out a little bit. So let's get up here on the road and try it with a little bit of RPM. So I'm turning about 2100 RPM, third gear. Just gonna kind of can it, see what it does. A little bit of a bobble, slight hesitation, takes right off, and I like floored it. So if I just slightly get it, still slight bobble. I'm wondering if I'm a little bit too rich now. It takes time to dial this in. I'm thinking of maybe going back to a 31, or maybe I could stay on this 37 squirter. I still think that's too big, but I could go to a milder cam. It just takes time to dial this stuff in. So after driving around a little bit longer, it really liked that 37 nozzle shot. It just seems to me that it's way too oversized. I wouldn't think I'd need much more in the 31 in the right camshaft, but or the right pump shot cam. But it really did feel good, except for that initial off bog. I don't want to mess with it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take another look and see when it actually starts pumping, because I'm suspecting there still might be a little bit of delay there. Okay, so here's my carburetor. Right in there is the pump squirters. Down here is my throttle. So I should be able to just barely start tweaking that, and I should see a pump. But I'm not. See, I can move this a little bit. There, I can get a little squirt. You can see it coming out, but it takes not immediately off of zero throttle. Now I know my transition slots are set up good, so I'm going to see if a different cam will kick this in quicker, or if I can just make this tighter, and then we'll take it from the test drive and see what happens. Well, that was it. I got that thing tightened up. No hesitation. Takes off hard. And it's happy all the way around. It really loves that 37 squirter, 37 squirter, which to me just seems too big. I thought it should have been fine with this build with the 31, but the test drive doesn't lie. And so the number one thing that got me was that loose accelerator pump linkage. That's your first stop, and once I tighten that up, this thing is just happy. I still see a little bit of dip on the AFR, but that's expected just because you're slamming the pedal open. But I think I'm going to turn off the camera and enjoy a cruise. Oh, one thing, I'm not really going into tuning the 4 barrels. That is a spring on these vacuum secondaries. You can kind of control how sensitive it is when it opens up, and that's also just the seat of the pants. You can run up and down the springs, just see what you like the best, much like the accelerator pump. I'm happy with how mine is, and so I'm just going to let you know if it seems like it's a little boggy once you open the 4 barrels, or a little too lean. Play around with those springs and just until you like it. But anyway, I'm going to go for a cruise, and I hope you enjoyed this video. See you next time.